Petrodollar doomed as Qatar breaks ranks and sells its oil in Yuan. By Benjamin Fulford. June 19, 2017. BenjaminFulford.net. The crisis in Qatar marks a major turning point in the battle against the Qatari mafia. Ostensibly, Saudi Arabia and other oil-exporting states decided to try to blockade Qatar because it was supporting terrorism, quote-unquote. In reaction to this move, U.S. President Donald Trump showed the world he was not in charge of the U.S. by first supporting the blockade and then being forced by the Pentagon to change his stance 180 degrees the next day. What is really going on here is that Qatar reached a deal with Iran to export gas from its massive gas fields not west in exchange for worthless euros or US dollars, but rather east to places like India and China in exchange for their currencies. The U.S. House of Horrors, House of Representatives, reacted to this development by passing new sanctions against Russia that basically amounted to telling Europe to buy expensive American gas instead of cheap Russian gas. The Germans and Austrians reacted by telling the Americans to buzz off. BBC.com. These developments show clearly the old regime is falling apart, with splits between Washington and the EU becoming more pronounced by the day. The Qatari mafia-controlled Saudis and their Israeli partners in crime have seen their entire plan for an Arab NATO blow up in their faces. True Muslim countries like Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, and others, together with superpowers like Russia and China, lined up to support Qatar, leaving the Saudi-Israeli alliance isolated. India and Pakistan have shown they are with Russia and China by joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, something Iran is expected to do next year. The U.S. military, for its part, showed it was against the Qatari mafia by staging joint military drills with Qatar last week, even as China staged drills with Iran. Pentagon sources explain, the U.S. military needs Qatar because of the Al Udeid Air Base. The Pentagon sources did not mention the fact Qatar also offered to buy $12 billion worth of U.S. military jets to help keep the Pentagon financed. In any case, the airbase also functions to ensure that madman Satanist Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his fellow Khazarian mobsters do not get any chance to start World War III, the sources say. A more direct message would be, surrender or die. The battle to remove the Khazarians from all levers of control in Washington, D.C. is also intensifying. The fake blame everything on Russia campaign by the Khazarians is blowing up, with even Khazarian-owned corporate propaganda media stooges starting to expose it as completely bogus. The following Twitter storm, issued by Donald Trump, summarizes quite well how the power struggle in D.C. is going. You are witnessing the single greatest witch hunt in American political history, led by some very bad and conflicted people. They made up a phony collusion with Russia's story, found zero proof, so now they go for obstruction of justice on the phony story. Nice. I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. Why is that Hillary Clinton's family and Dems dealing with Russia are not looked at, but by Russian dealings are. Crooked H destroyed phones with hammer, bleached emails, and had husband meet with Attorney General days before she was cleared, and they talk about obstruction. A.G. Lynch made law enforcement decisions for political purposes, gave Hillary Clinton a free pass and protection, totally illegal. Pentagon sources say the next stage in the battle against the Khazarian mafia holdouts in D.C. will begin with the arrest of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, Special Counsel Robert Mueller, as well as Hillary Clinton, although CIA sources say she died last year, Barack Obama, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, former National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, former CIA head John Brennan, former NSA Director Michael Hayden, and others, at the second stage to decapitate the deep state. Fired FBI Director James Comey has been singing like a canary about the Khazarian mob as well as the P2 Freemason Lodge, CIA sources confirm. Quote, Comey was forced to commit two-stage seppuku in front of Congress, the sources say. He began ratting on his colleagues to avoid being charged with multiple felonies for leaking, misprision, deliberately hiding knowledge of felony, aiding obstruction of justice, etc. The Pentagon sources continue. The attack against Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner has also intensified as Trump picked New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's attorney and friend Chris Wray to run the FBI. Quote, Kushner hates Christie for putting his criminal Mossado dad Charles in jail when he was New Jersey prosecutor, the sources note. The Khazarians are, of course, literally fighting for their lives as their control grid continues to collapse. House Republican Majority Whip Steve Scalise may have been shot because of his support of anti-child sex trafficking laws as the battle against pedophilia escalates, the Pentagon sources note. The George Bush Sr. faction of the Khazarian mob is also diligently working to eliminate the evidence trail by bumping off former senior associates. That is why former Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega and arms dealer CIA asset Adnan Khashoggi were recently bumped off, Pentagon sources say. The power elite in Washington, D.C. is also in a deadlock because of MAB, or mutually assured blackmail, preventing the long-awaited mass arrests of known criminals like Senator John McCain. The answer will probably have to be to remove the 70% or so of Washington, D.C. politicians, both red and blue, who have been corrupted by drugs, pedophilia, bribes, etc. In Europe, meanwhile, the German-controlled Vichy regime in France, run by Rothschild puppet Macron, stole Sunday's parliamentary election to give his slave regime the appearance of popular support. The French Rothschild regime is circling the wagons as WikiLeaks of Hillary Clinton's email reveal to the world at large what this newsletter reported years ago, and that is the fact the French overthrew the Libyan regime of Muammar Gaddafi because he threatened their control of French Africa with his plan to issue a gold-backed dinar. GlobalResearch.ca. In a sign the battle for Africa is far from over, the French staged robbery of gold mines in Mali came under renewed attack last week as a resort for expats there was attacked. BBC.com. Khazarian attempts to prolong their financial system by seizing gold are also continuing in many parts of the world. In the Philippines, the U.S. military helped President Rodrigo Duterte fight Khazarian-hired Daesh mercenaries who were trying to seize gold in Marawi. Also, last week, in the island of Bougainville, 10 trucks filled with mercenaries were dispatched to try to capture White Dragon Society representatives, including this writer, visiting King David Pai II. The Bougainville rebel army stopped them by cutting down trees and shutting a highway after the WDS representatives were evacuated. The French branch of the Rothschild family, through their Rio Tinto Zinc Corporation, are trying yet again to force landowners in Bougainville to sign over to them the rights to mine gold on the island. The Rothschilds also do not want the world at large to know they are guilty of slaughtering at least 10% of the island's population. It is because of this history of slaughter and environmental destruction that the locals would rather fight another war than let those mass-murdering war criminals back in. We will write more about this and other related news in a special report to be issued later this week. Suffice it to say for now that the Rothschilds, especially the French branch headed by wanted criminal David de Rothschild, will not get their hands on any of the huge gold supplies on that island. In Japan, meanwhile, the Khazarian puppet regime of Shinzo Abe showed how insecure it was by passing an anti-conspiracy bill that gives the government power to arrest people for crimes they have not yet committed. This sort of acceleration of repressive measures was seen in Eastern Europe too, in places like Romania, just before the regimes there collapsed. Sources in Japanese military and law enforcement circles say they will not obey criminal orders from the politicians to oppress the people despite the passage of this law. In any case, right-wing sources close to the emperor say Abe is very ill and has been advised by his doctor to resign or else die within 6 months. However, Abe intends to die in office, the source says. Japanese power brokers are waiting for the civil war inside the U.S. government to end before they make any big changes here, multiple sources agree. For now, the old Rockefeller-Rothschild-controlled regime remains in place here, even though it has no support from the military or other armed groups in the country. However, behind the scenes, the Khazarians have already lost Japan, as well as South Korea.